Sometimes the most powerful moments in life happen when we least expect them. In a world where people rush past each other without a second glance, where strangers remain strangers, and where acts of kindness seem to be disappearing, one small hand reaching out in darkness would prove that humanity's greatest strength lies not in what we can see, but in what we choose to do when no one is watching. This is not just another heartwarming story. This is about a moment that shattered every assumption about duty, compassion, and what it truly means to serve others. When a castle guard encountered a little boy who couldn't see the world around him, neither of them knew they were about to experience something that would change not just their lives, but the lives of everyone who witnessed what happened next. What you're about to discover will challenge everything you think you know about human connection. It will make you question whether the smallest gestures really can create the biggest impact. And by the end, you'll understand why sometimes the most profound acts of love come from the most unexpected places. This is the story of two souls who found each other in the darkness, and how their meeting created a light that continues to shine today. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cobblestone courtyard of Ravenscroft Castle, but 7-year-old Tommy Williams couldn't see any of them. Born completely blind, Tommy experienced the world through sounds, smells, and the gentle guidance of his grandmother's weathered hand. Today was different from their usual quiet days at home. Today, grandmother had brought him to the castle for the annual harvest festival, hoping to give the boy a chance to feel part of something bigger than their small cottage world. Margaret Williams, Tommy's grandmother, had been the castle's head cook for over 30 years before her retirement. The festival was her idea of showing Tommy the place where she had spent most of her working life, describing every corner, every stone, every tradition that made Ravenscroft special. She wanted him to understand that there was beauty in the world, even if he couldn't see it with his eyes. The castle buzzed with activity. Merchants had set up colorful stalls selling everything from fresh bread to hand-woven tapestries. Musicians played lively tunes on fiddles and drums, their melodies mixing with the laughter of children and the chatter of excited visitors. The smell of roasted chestnuts and cinnamon cakes filled the air, making Tommy's mouth water despite his nervousness about being in such a crowded, unfamiliar place. Tommy held tight to his grandmother's hand as she led him slowly through the festival grounds. Every few steps, she would stop to describe something new. "There's a puppet show happening over there, Tommy. The puppets are dressed like knights and dragons. Can you hear the children laughing?" Tommy would nod and smile, try to paint pictures in his mind based on the sound around him. What Tommy didn't know was that his presence had already been noticed by someone very important. Captain Marcus Reed, the head of the castle guard, had spotted the small boy with his cane and the gentle way his grandmother guided him through the crowd. Marcus had been a soldier for 15 years, trained to notice everything and protect everyone within the castle walls. But there was something about watching this little boy navigate a world he couldn't see that touched something deep in the captain's heart. Marcus was not a man known for showing emotion. His fellow guards respected him for his strength, his fairness, and his unwavering dedication to duty. He had served in battles, protected royalty, and maintained order during countless events. But watching Tommy carefully feel his way around obstacles, listening intently to every sound, and trusting completely in his grandmother's guidance, Marcus felt something shift inside him. The captain found himself following at a distance, not to interfere or cause alarm, but because he was genuinely concerned about the boy's safety in such a busy environment. The festival crowd was thick, and people weren't always careful about watching where they walked. Marcus had already seen several close calls where rushing visitors had nearly bumped into Tommy, only saved by his grandmother's quick reactions. As the morning progressed, Tommy and his grandmother visited various stalls. Margaret would describe the different crafts, foods, and entertainments, sometimes purchasing small items for Tommy to touch and explore. At the pottery stall, the kind craftsman let Tommy feel the smooth clay and rough textures of different vessels. At the fabric booth, Tommy ran his fingers over silk, wool, and linen, learning to distinguish between the different materials. The blacksmith demonstration was Tommy's favorite so far. The rhythmic hammering against hot metal created a music all its own, and when the blacksmith explained what he was making, Tommy could almost see the horseshoes and tools taking shape in his imagination. The heat from the forge warmed his face, and the smell of coal and metal gave him a complete sensory picture of the ancient craft. But it was during the storytelling session that something special began to happen. The castle's official storyteller, an elderly man named Benedict, was entertaining a group of children with tales of brave knights and magical adventures. Tommy and his grandmother had found seats on a low stone wall where Tommy could listen comfortably. Benedict was in the middle of describing a particularly exciting battle scene when he noticed Tommy in the audience. The boy was completely absorbed in the story, his head tilted slightly as he concentrated on every word. His face showed every emotion of the tale, from worry during dangerous moments to joy when the hero succeeded. Benedict had been telling stories for decades, but he had rarely seen such engaged listening. Without breaking his narrative rhythm, Benedict began to add more descriptive details about sounds, textures, and feelings. Instead of just saying the knight drew his sword, he described the sharp ring of steel sliding against leather, the weight of the blade in his hand, the cool metal warming under his grip. Tommy's smile grew wider with each added detail, and other children in the audience began to appreciate the story even more because of these rich descriptions. Captain Marcus, still watching from his respectful distance, noticed this interaction between the storyteller and Tommy. He saw how the boy's face lit up when the descriptions became more detailed, how he leaned forward during exciting parts, and how he clapped enthusiastically at the story's end. Something about Tommy's pure joy and enthusiasm in the face of his challenges moved Marcus in a way he hadn't expected. After the storytelling session, Margaret decided it was time for lunch. She and Tommy found a quiet spot under an old oak tree where they could eat the sandwiches she had packed while listening to the distant sounds of the festival. Tommy was telling his grandmother about all the things he had experienced when disaster struck. Margaret had been reaching into their picnic basket when she suddenly gasped and clutched her chest. Her face went pale, and she began having trouble breathing. Tommy immediately knew something was wrong, even though he couldn't see what was happening. "Grandmother? Grandmother, what's wrong?" Tommy's voice was filled with panic as he felt around trying to understand what was happening. Margaret tried to speak, but could only manage short, labored breaths. She was having a heart attack. Tommy began calling for help, his young voice almost lost in the noise of the festival. He tried to remember everything his grandmother had taught him about asking for assistance, but panic was making it hard to think clearly. He stood up and began waving his arms, shouting, "Help! Please help! Something's wrong with my grandmother." The festival noise was so loud that most people didn't hear Tommy's cries. Those who did notice assumed he was just an excited child playing. Tommy felt more alone and scared than he ever had in his life. His grandmother was the only family he had, the person who helped him navigate every day of his life, and now she needed help that he didn't know how to give. That's when Captain Marcus appeared. The captain had been keeping his distant watch when he saw Margaret collapse. Without hesitation, he ran toward them, his training kicking in immediately. But what he found when he reached the oak tree was something that would stay with him forever. Tommy was kneeling beside his unconscious grandmother, his small hands gently touching her face, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Please wake up, grandmother," he whispered. "I don't know what to do without you. Please don't leave me alone." Marcus dropped to his knees beside them. "Son," he said gently, "I'm Captain Reed of the Castle Guard. I'm here to help. Can you tell me what happened?" Tommy turned toward the sound of Marcus's voice, relief flooding his face. She started breathing funny and then fell down. "I tried to call for help, but no one heard me. Please, sir, can you help her? She's all I have." Marcus was already checking Margaret's pulse and breathing while calling for the castle physician. But Tommy's words hit him like a physical blow. This brave little boy, who couldn't see the world around him, was completely dependent on the woman who now lay unconscious. The trust in Tommy's voice when he asked for help, the complete faith that someone would care enough to assist them, touched something deep in Marcus's soul. "I'm going to take care of both of you," Marcus promised, surprised by the emotion in his own voice. "The physician is coming, and we're going to make sure your grandmother gets the best care possible." As they waited for medical help to arrive, Marcus found himself holding Tommy's hand, offering the comfort and reassurance the boy desperately needed. Tommy gripped the captain's hand tightly, as if it were a lifeline in a storm. "What's your name, son?" Marcus asked, trying to keep Tommy calm while monitoring Margaret's condition. "Tommy Williams, sir. My grandmother is Margaret Williams. She used to work here in the castle kitchen. She brought me to see the festival today because she wanted me to understand how beautiful this place is, even though I can't see it." Marcus felt his throat tighten. This little boy, facing the possible loss of his only family member, was still thinking about beauty and wonder. There was something profound about Tommy's spirit that Marcus couldn't ignore. When the castle physician finally arrived with his assistants, they quickly assessed Margaret's condition and determined she needed immediate care in the castle's medical chambers. As they prepared to carry her inside, Tommy became distressed again. "Where are they taking her? Can I go with her? I won't be able to find her if we get separated." Marcus made a decision that surprised even himself. "You're staying with me, Tommy. I'm going to make sure you're taken care of while the physicians help your grandmother. You won't be alone, I promise." The way Tommy's face transformed with relief and gratitude did something to Marcus that years of military training hadn't prepared him for. This little boy's trust was both a gift and a responsibility that the captain suddenly wanted more than anything to deserve. As they followed the medical team toward the castle, Tommy walking carefully beside Marcus with his hand still firmly held, neither of them knew that this moment was just the beginning of something extraordinary. The captain thought he was simply doing his duty by helping a child in distress. Tommy thought he was just lucky that a kind stranger had heard his calls for help. But what was really happening was the start of a bond that would transform both of their lives in ways neither could imagine. Sometimes the most important journeys begin with a single step taken in darkness, guided only by faith and the kindness of someone willing to reach out their hand. The castle's medical chambers were a place Marcus had visited many times before, usually to check on injured guards or receive treatment for his own battle wounds. But walking through those familiar corridors with Tommy's small hand in his, everything felt different. The stone walls seemed to echo with new meaning, and Marcus found himself seeing his surroundings through different eyes. Dr. Edmund Hartwell, the castle's chief physician, was a man Marcus had known for years. They had worked together during emergencies, treating everything from training accidents to more serious injuries from border skirmishes. But when Dr. Hartwell emerged from the treatment room where Margaret was being cared for, his expression was more serious than Marcus had expected. "Captain Reed," Dr. Hartwell said quietly, gesturing for Marcus to step away from Tommy for a private conversation. "The woman has suffered a significant heart attack. We've stabilized her for now, but her condition remains critical. She's unconscious and may remain so for some time. Even if she recovers, it will be a long and uncertain process." Marcus felt his chest tighten as he looked back at Tommy, who was sitting on a wooden bench, carefully feeling the carved details of the armrest while he waited for news about his grandmother. The boy had no idea how serious the situation really was. "What about the boy?" Marcus asked. "Does he have other family?" Dr. Hartwell shook his head. "From what I could gather from the woman's papers, she was his only guardian. His parents died in a fever outbreak 3 years ago. If she doesn't recover, he didn't need to finish the sentence." Marcus understood immediately. Tommy would be alone in the world, a blind child with no one to care for him. In most cases, such children ended up in poorly funded institutions where they received minimal care and little hope for a meaningful future. The thought of Tommy in such a place made Marcus feel sick. Returning to Tommy, Marcus sat down beside him on the bench. The boy immediately turned toward him, his face filled with hopeful expectation. How is she, Captain Reed? Can I see her now? Marcus chose his words carefully. She's very sick, Tommy. The physicians are doing everything they can to help her, but she needs to rest for a long time. She's sleeping now, and we don't know when she'll wake up. Tommy's face fell, and he was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was small and scared. Is she going to die? The question hit Marcus like an arrow to the chest. This little boy was facing the possibility of losing the only person in the world who loved him, and he was asking for honesty from someone he barely knew. Marcus realized that Tommy deserved the truth, even if it was difficult. I don't know, son, but I promise you this. No matter what happens, you won't be alone. I'm going to make sure you're taken care of. Tommy nodded solemnly, trying to be brave. Grandmother always said that God puts people in our path when we need them most. Maybe that's why you were there today. Marcus felt something break open in his chest. Here was this child, facing the worst crisis of his young life, and he was finding ways to see hope and purpose in the situation. Marcus had seen grown soldiers crumble under far less pressure than what Tommy was handling with such grace. Would you like me to tell you about the castle while we wait? Marcus offered, hoping to distract Tommy from his worries. Your grandmother worked here for many years, so this place was very important to her. Tommy's face brightened slightly. She told me stories about working in the kitchen, about all the grand feasts and important visitors. She said the castle was like a small city with its own community of people who cared about each other. Marcus began describing the castle in detail, but not the way most people would describe a building. Instead, he focused on the things Tommy could understand through his other senses. He talked about how the morning light warmed the stones in the courtyard, how different areas of the castle had their own distinct sounds and smells, how the architecture created echoes and acoustics that could help someone navigate even without sight. As Marcus spoke, he found himself noticing details about his own workplace that he had never considered before. He realized that the castle really was like a small community with its own rhythms and patterns that someone like Tommy could learn to recognize and navigate. The Great Hall has these massive wooden beams overhead, Marcus explained. When you clap your hands or speak loudly, you can hear your voice bounce off them. And the kitchen always smells like fresh bread in the morning and roasted meat in the evening. There's a fountain in the center courtyard that makes a constant, gentle splashing sound. Some people find it annoying, but I think you might find it comforting. Tommy listened intently, asking questions about everything. He wanted to know about the different types of stone used in construction, about the various jobs people did in the castle, about the daily routines and traditions. Marcus found himself enjoying these conversations more than he had enjoyed anything in years. As the hours passed, other members of the castle community began to take notice of the captain and the little blind boy. Word had spread about Margaret's collapse and Tommy's situation. Sir William Ashford, the castle's lord, stopped by to check on them personally. Captain Reed, Sir William said, I understand we have a young guest in need of assistance. Marcus stood and saluted, but kept one hand on Tommy's shoulder. Yes, my lord. This is Tommy Williams, Margaret Williams' grandson. Margaret suffered a heart attack during the festival. Sir William knelt down to Tommy's level, something that surprised Marcus. The Lord was known for his formal manner and strict adherence to protocol, but there was genuine warmth in his voice when he spoke to Tommy. Young man, I want you to know that your grandmother was one of the most valued members of our castle community. Any family of hers will always have a place here. Captain Reed, I'm authorizing whatever accommodations are necessary for Tommy's comfort and care. Tommy's face showed confusion and gratitude. Thank you, sir. I don't understand everything that's happening, but everyone here has been very kind to me. Sir William looked at Marcus meaningfully. Perhaps you could show Tommy to one of the guest chambers where he can rest comfortably tonight. We'll reassess the situation tomorrow based on Margaret's condition. As they made their way to the guest quarters, Marcus realized he was volunteering for something far beyond his normal duties. He was a soldier trained for combat and security, not childcare. But every instinct in his body was telling him that Tommy needed protection and guidance, and Marcus found himself wanting to provide both. The guest chamber was comfortable, but unfamiliar territory for Tommy. Marcus watched as the boy carefully felt his way around the room, mapping out the location of the bed, the chair, the window, and the wash basin. Tommy moved methodically and thoroughly, creating a mental picture of his temporary home. "This is much fancier than our cottage," Tommy said. "Grandmother would be amazed that I'm sleeping in a real castle room." Marcus helped Tommy get settled, making sure he knew where everything was located. When it came time for the evening meal, Marcus faced another decision. He could have food brought to Tommy's room, or he could take the boy to the great hall where the castle community normally ate together. "Tommy," Marcus said, "would you like to eat dinner with me and some of the other people who work in the castle? It might be noisy and crowded, but I think you'd enjoy meeting some of your grandmother's old friends." Tommy's face lit up. "Really? There are people here who knew grandmother when she worked in the kitchen?" The great hall during dinner was indeed noisy and crowded, but Marcus was surprised by how warmly Tommy was received. Word about Margaret's condition and Tommy's situation had spread throughout the castle community. Cook after cook, servant after servant, and even some of the guards came over to introduce themselves and share memories of Margaret. "Your grandmother made the best apple tarts in the kingdom," said Elena, the current head cook. "She taught me half of what I know about cooking. You have her smile, you know." Tommy beamed at this. "She still makes apple tart for me every Sunday. She says the secret is adding just a tiny bit of cinnamon to the apple filling." Marcus watched these interactions with growing amazement. Tommy wasn't just receiving sympathy. He was connecting with people, sharing stories, and making them smile even while dealing with his own crisis. There was something remarkable about this child's ability to find joy and meaning in human connection. During the meal, Marcus found himself naturally describing the food to Tommy in detail. The texture of the roasted chicken, the herbs used in the vegetables, the way the candlelight flickered across the hall. He realized he was developing a new way of experiencing the world himself, paying attention to sensory details he had always taken for granted. After dinner, Marcus walked Tommy back to his room. The boy was tired but seemed more hopeful than he had earlier in the day. "Captain Reed," Tommy said as he prepared for bed, "do you think grandmother would be proud of how I acted today? I try to be brave like she taught me." Marcus felt his throat constrict with emotion. "Tommy, I think your grandmother would be incredibly proud of you. You've shown more courage today than many soldiers I've known." As Marcus tucked Tommy into bed and prepared to leave, the boy caught his hand. "Will you still be here tomorrow? I mean, I know you have important guard duties, but I'll be here, Tommy. I promise." Walking back to his own quarters, Marcus reflected on the most unusual day of his military career. He had expected to spend the festival ensuring security and maintaining order. Instead, he had found himself responsible for a blind child who had somehow managed to change his perspective on everything. Marcus had always prided himself on his dedication to duty, his strength, and his ability to remain emotionally detached from situations that required clear thinking. But Tommy was breaking down those barriers without even trying. The boy's trust, his courage, and his capacity for finding hope in difficult circumstances were teaching Marcus things about real strength that no military manual had ever covered. That night, Marcus lay awake thinking about Tommy's words regarding people being put in our path when we need them most. The captain had always believed he was self-sufficient, that his job was to protect others without needing anything in return. But Tommy was showing him something different, that sometimes protecting others means allowing yourself to care, to feel, and to let another person's well-being become part of your own purpose. Marcus made a decision that night that would change both of their lives forever. No matter what happened to Margaret, no matter what challenges lay ahead, he was going to make sure Tommy had someone who would always be there for him. The boy had reached out for help in his moment of greatest need, and Marcus was going to make sure that outstretched hand never went unanswered again. Outside Tommy's window, the castle settled into its nighttime quiet. But inside both rooms, two people who had found each other by chance were beginning to discover that some connections run deeper than circumstance, deeper than duty and deeper than the barriers that usually keep strangers apart. 3 days passed before Margaret Williams opened her eyes. During those 3 days, something extraordinary happened within the walls of Ravenscroft Castle. Tommy Williams, a 7-year-old blind boy who had arrived as a festival visitor, had somehow become the heart of a community transformation that no one could have predicted. Marcus had kept his promise to stay with Tommy, but what started as a sense of duty had evolved into something much deeper. Each morning, the captain would collect Tommy from his guest chamber, and they would make rounds together throughout the castle. Marcus found himself describing his daily responsibilities in detail, turning routine security checks into learning adventures for Tommy. "This is the armory, Tommy," Marcus would explain as they walked through the weapons storage area. "Can you hear how our footsteps echo differently in here? The walls are made of thicker stone to protect the weapons from moisture. Feel this shield. Can you tell what metal it's made from?" Tommy would run his hands carefully over the equipment, asking questions that made Marcus think about his profession in new ways. "Why do swords have different weights? How do you know which armor fits properly? What does it feel like to carry a heavy sword in battle?" These conversations led Marcus to realize that he had been going through his duties mechanically for years. Tommy's curiosity was rekindling his own sense of purpose and pride in his work. The boy's questions weren't just about satisfying curiosity. They showed a genuine interest in understanding the world around him, despite not being able to see it. Word of Tommy and Marcus's daily adventures spread throughout the castle. Other guards began joining their rounds, contributing their own expertise to Tommy's education. The blacksmith taught Tommy about metalworking by letting him feel different tools and hear the various sounds they made. The stable master introduced Tommy to the horses, teaching him how to approach them safely and understand their individual personalities through sound and touch. Elena, the head cook, invited Tommy into the kitchen where his grandmother had once worked. She let him help with simple tasks like kneading dough and measuring spices, all while telling stories about Margaret's time there. Tommy's face glowed with pride as he learned about his grandmother's reputation and the respect she had earned from everyone who worked with her. But it was Dr. Hartwell who noticed the most significant change happening during those 3 days. As Tommy visited Margaret each afternoon, sitting beside her bed and talking to her unconscious form, the physician observed something remarkable in the boy's emotional resilience. "Captain Reed," Dr. Hartwell said on the third evening, "I've been watching that boy, and I've never seen anything quite like it. Most children in a situation would be overwhelmed by fear and uncertainty. But Tommy seems to be growing stronger each day, not weaker." Marcus nodded, having noticed the same thing. "He's remarkable. I've seen grown men fall apart under less stress than what he's handling. But somehow he finds something positive in every situation." "I think it's because of you," Dr. Hartwell said quietly. "You've given him stability and purpose when his world was falling apart. That makes all the difference for a child." Marcus felt uncomfortable with the praise. "I'm just doing what anyone would do." "No, Marcus, what you're doing is extraordinary, and I think you know it." When Margaret finally awakened on that third afternoon, Tommy was sitting beside her bed as usual, telling her about everything he had learned about the castle. Marcus was standing nearby, having just finished describing the view from Margaret's window. "Grandmother?" Tommy whispered, feeling the slight movement of her hand. "Grandmother, are you awake?" Margaret's eyes fluttered open, and her first sight was Tommy's hopeful face leaning over her. Behind him stood Captain Marcus Reed, a man she recognized from her years working in the castle, but had never spoken to personally. "Tommy," Margaret whispered weakly, "what happened? Where are we?" As Tommy excitedly began telling his grandmother about everything that had occurred, Margaret's eyes met Marcus's over the boy's head. In that look, she saw something that made her understand immediately that her grandson had been in the best possible hands. Dr. Hartwell's examination revealed that while Margaret was recovering, the damage to her heart was significant. She would need months of rest and could never again handle the physical demands of caring for an active 7-year-old boy on her own. The cottage they lived in was isolated, far from medical help if another emergency occurred. That evening, after Tommy had fallen asleep in the chair beside his grandmother's bed, Margaret asked to speak with Marcus privately. "Captain Reed," she began, her voice still weak but determined, "I need to ask you something that has no right to ask, but I have no choice." Marcus leaned forward. "Anything, Mrs. Williams. Tommy has told me about these past few days, about how you've cared for him and shown him around the castle. He's never talked about anyone the way he talks about you." Margaret paused, struggling with emotions and physical weakness. "I won't be able to care for him the way he needs anymore. My heart, Dr. Hartwell, says it will never be strong enough for me to live alone with a child who requires so much guidance and protection." Marcus felt his heart racing, sensing where this conversation was heading. "I have a sister in the northern provinces who could take us in," Margaret continued, "but she has 5 children of her own and little patience for Tommy's special needs. He would survive there, but he wouldn't thrive. He wouldn't have the opportunities to learn and grow like he's had these past few days." Margaret reached out and touched Marcus's hand. "I've watched you with him, Captain. I've seen how he lights up when you're around, how confident he becomes when you're guiding him. I've never seen him trust anyone the way he trusts you." Marcus felt tears threatening, something that hadn't happened since he was Tommy's age himself. "What are you asking, Mrs. Williams?" "I'm asking if you would consider becoming his guardian. I know it's an enormous request. I know you're a soldier with responsibilities. I know you never signed up for raising a blind child. But Tommy needs someone who will see his potential instead of his limitations. He needs someone who will teach him to be strong and independent. He needs you." Marcus was quiet for a long time, but his heart was already racing with an answer he hadn't expected. Over the past 3 days, he had come to love Tommy like the son he had never had. The boy's courage, curiosity, and capacity for joy had filled an emptiness in Marcus's life that he hadn't even realized existed. "Mrs. Williams," Marcus finally said, "I need to be honest with you. I don't know anything about raising children. I'm a soldier, accustomed to military discipline and structure. I've never had a family of my own." Margaret squeezed his hand. "But you've shown Tommy more love and attention in 3 days than many children receive in months. You made him feel valued and capable. That's what matters most." Marcus looked through the doorway at Tommy, sleeping peacefully in his chair. The boy's face was relaxed and content, showing none of the anxiety and fear that had marked his features 3 days ago. "There would be practical considerations," Marcus said, working through the logistics. "Housing, education, making sure he gets the specialized care he needs. Sir William has already spoken to me about that," Margaret said. "He's offered to make Tommy a permanent resident of the castle, with you as his guardian. Tommy would live here, learn here, and grow up as part of this community. There's a retired scholar here who has experience teaching children with special needs. Tommy would receive an education that could prepare him for any number of futures." Marcus realized that the entire castle community had been thinking about Tommy's future while he had been focused on just getting through each day. The network of support that had developed around the boy over 3 days was unlike anything Marcus had ever witnessed. "What does Tommy think about this idea?" Marcus asked. Margaret smiled, the first real smile Marcus had seen from her since she woke up. "He asked me this afternoon if there was any way he could stay here forever. He said this is the first place he's ever been where people see him as Tommy first and Blind second." That night, Marcus walked the castle battlements, something he did when he needed to think clearly. The autumn air was crisp, and the stars were brilliant overhead. He thought about his life as a soldier, his commitment to duty, and the unexpected turn his existence had taken. He had always believed that his purpose was to serve the castle and its lord through his skills as a warrior and leader. But Tommy was showing him a different kind of service. The daily commitment of caring for someone who depended on you completely, not out of fear or duty, but out of love. The next morning, Marcus found Tommy in the great hall, carefully eating breakfast while listening to Elena describe the different pastries she was preparing for the day. "Tommy," Marcus said, sitting down beside him, I need to talk to you about something important." Tommy immediately turned toward him with complete attention. "What is it, Captain Reed?" "Your grandmother's getting better, but she's going to need a lot of rest and care. She can't take care of you the way she used to. We've been talking about what would be best for both of you." Tommy's face showed concern, but not panic. The security he had felt over the past few days had given him confidence to face whatever came next. "There's a possibility that you could stay here at the castle permanently," Marcus continued. "You would live here, go to school here, and be part of our community. But you would need a guardian, someone who would be responsible for taking care of you every day." Tommy was quiet for a moment, processing this information. Would that person want to take care of me? I mean, I know I need more help than most children. Marcus felt his heart break and heal at the same time. "Tommy, what if I told you that I would like to be that person? What if I asked you whether you would want me to be your guardian?" The transformation in Tommy's face was instant and complete. Joy, relief, and love combined in an expression that Marcus knew he would remember for the rest of his life. "Really? You want to take care of me forever? Even though I can't see and need help with things?" "Tommy," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion, "taking care of you wouldn't be a burden. It would be an honor. You've taught me more about courage and joy in 3 days than I learned in 15 years as a soldier. I would be proud to be your guardian, if you'll have me." Tommy launched himself into Marcus's arms with such force that the captain nearly fell backward off the bench. But he caught the boy and held him tight, feeling like his heart might burst with happiness. "I love you, Captain Reed," Tommy whispered into Marcus's shoulder. "I love you too, son," Marcus whispered back, the word feeling natural and right. 3 months later, Tommy Williams officially became Tommy Reed through legal adoption. Margaret had recovered enough to move to a comfortable cottage on the castle grounds where she could see Tommy regularly while receiving the medical care she needed. Tommy's education began immediately with Master Jonathan, the retired scholar Sir William had arranged. But his real learning continued with Marcus and the entire castle community who had embraced him as one of their own. Within a year, Tommy could navigate the entire castle independently. He learned to identify people by their footsteps, to understand his location by acoustic cues, and to move confidently through spaces that had once seemed impossibly complex. More importantly, he learned that his blindness was just one characteristic among many, not the defining feature of his existence. Marcus discovered gifts in himself he had never known existed. His patience, his ability to explain complex concepts in simple terms, and his talent for helping Tommy build confidence and independence surprised everyone, including himself. The other guards began coming to him for advice on their own family problems, recognizing that their captain had developed wisdom that extended far beyond military matters. 5 years later, 12-year-old Tommy Reed was known throughout the region as one of the most remarkable young people anyone had ever met. He could ride horses, help in the blacksmith shop, assist in the kitchen, and even participate in modified guard training exercises. He had learned to read through touch and could write with the help of special tools Master Jonathan had designed for him. But what made Tommy truly special wasn't his adaptations to blindness. It was his character. He had grown into a young man who saw the best in everyone, who offered help before asking for it, and who faced challenges with a combination of determination and joy that inspired everyone around him. Marcus, now in his early 30s, had become known as one of the finest leaders the castle had ever seen. His combination of military skill and deep compassion made him respected by everyone from the humblest servant to Sir William himself. But, more importantly, he had become the father he had never imagined he could be. On a spring morning 6 years after that first festival day, Marcus and Tommy were sitting in their favorite spot on the castle wall, watching the sunrise together. Marcus still described the colors and the play of light on the landscape, but now Tommy would add his own observations about the sounds of waking birds and the smell of blooming flowers. "Papa," Tommy said, using the name that had evolved naturally over the years, "do you remember that first day when grandmother got sick?" Marcus smiled, still amazed at how that terrifying day had led to such joy. I remember everything about that day, especially how brave you were. I was scared, Tommy admitted. But you know what I remember most? What's that? I remember how your voice sounded when you promised you wouldn't leave me alone. I believed you completely, even though I had just met you. I think that's when I knew you were going to be my papa. Marcus felt the familiar tightness in his throat that came whenever Tommy shared these profound insights. You know what I remember most? What? I remember thinking that I was just doing my job as a guard, helping someone who needed assistance. I had no idea that you were going to change my entire life. Tommy leaned against Marcus's shoulder. Grandmother says that's how the best things happen, when we're just trying to do what's right, not knowing how much it's going to matter. As they sat together, watching the world wake up around them, Marcus reflected on the truth of that statement. He had reached out to help a frightened child, and, in return, had discovered a love that gave meaning to everything else in his life. Tommy had reached out for help in his darkest moment, and had found not just rescue, but a family and a community that treasured him exactly as he was. The castle bell began to chime the hour, signaling the start of another day. Soon they would need to go about their morning routines, Marcus to his guard duties, and Tommy to his lessons with Master Jonathan. But for these few precious minutes, they could just sit together and appreciate the miracle of how two strangers had found each other and created something beautiful. Sometimes the most profound acts of love really do come from the most unexpected places. And sometimes a little boy reaching out in darkness finds not just a helping hand, but a father who will spend the rest of his life making sure that hand never feels alone again.